tonight, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Little ruckusy.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Lake Mill City Council to order for June 4th, 2024. Misty, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Curler?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here?
Ms. Schmager?
Here.
Ms. Quidno?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next agenda item, number 4, is Councilmember Board Reports and Acceptance of Meeting Minutes. So we have our City Council minutes from May 21st and Plan Commission meeting minutes from April 23rd and May 6th. Are there any questions or comments on any of these minutes? And then I'll just point out, one of the Plan Commission meeting minutes was a work session, and we have a couple ordinance proposals tonight that were part of the outcome from that work session. Okay, so hearing no questions or corrections, we'll accept those minutes into the public record. Next item, number 5, is correspondence. So I'll kick it off. I received some correspondence about the tornado siren at the north end of the lake possibly not working, about the Rock Lake Dam operation, and about a new fence under construction on Mulberry Street. Mary, what did you have?
I had also a correspondence on the dam operation, specifically reconciling the ruler to the sensor values that are reported.
Thank you. Greg?
I'm still working through some email issues, so nothing to report today.
Okay. Michelle?
Mine was nice and quiet, but I did receive some correspondence in person from a lovely little lady of mine regarding a city park garden.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did read that.
Oh, you did read that? You read that message?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Steve?
For me, it was very quiet. I don't have any correspondence to report.
Okay, great, thank you. So then our next item is questions and public comment. So before we start this session, I just would like to make sure that people are aware, if you would like to comment on anything that's on our agenda tonight, this is the time to do that. We don't generally have comments during the individual agenda item. So if you want to speak on anything that's on the agenda tonight, this is your opportunity to do that. And also, I know that there are a few folks here in the audience that are interested in the proposed ordinance regarding fences. And I'll just make people aware that tonight is the first reading of that ordinance, so we will not be voting on that tonight. That's late in the agenda, but we will not be voting on that tonight. So for questions and public comment, the public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comments may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meetings law discourages actions by the council on items that are not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. State your name and address when starting your comments. If you're here in person, please fill out the sign-in sheet that's provided at the podium. If there's anyone attending online that wants to speak, please type your name and address in the chat feature, and the clerk will let me know that you want to speak. So is there anyone here in the room that would like to give public comment tonight? Please step forward. And I think we're going to have a number of folks, so I am going to set a timer tonight for the 3 minutes.
My name is Jacob Arndt. I'm 527 Mulberry and Water Street and Madison Street and Linden Street and Highway B. So I'm here to oppose the changes in the fence ordinance. So I was looking at the changes, and it looks like about 1/3 of the provisions in the ordinance are being struck. So, I can't understand what the reasoning is for striking those. Most of them are to protect the views and the visual impact. And those provisions have been around for quite a while, seem to be doing a pretty good job. And the visual impact of a fence, I mean architecturally, is really dramatic for a cheap input. It's a really dramatic visual impact fences are, architecturally, giving the nature of a neighborhood. If you get it wrong, I think it's a blight, if you get it wrong. So, managing the visual impact on fencing, I mean, it may seem like a minor issue, but you put a fence up with no, you know, 6 foot high, with no real provisions for seeing through, field of vision, provisions for, you know, ameliorating the impact on the neighbor on the other side of the fence is something that I think is fairly serious. Just striking 1/3 of the provisions, I think, is pretty radical. There's no really reason for striking them. You know, there needs to be some leadership in the urban landscape principles. Got a nice town, and you start boxing fences in, 6 foot high, of whatever kind of material, no regulations on materials. I mean, that's just not professional management. It's just not. Got a nice community, nice sight lines, heights of fences, masonry I would prefer, all fences be masonry, but we can't do that.
And that is your 3 minutes. If you can please wrap it up.
Okay. Wood is a good material. Botanical is a good material. Industrial materials like vinyl or corrugated metal or even pallets. We need to have a threshold where it's limited.
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Arndt. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comment?
I'm Mike Whipperfirth. I live at 365 Rosewood. I basically just want to reiterate what I said at the last meeting. I feel like a lot of everything is based on how things look. When reading your code, it seems it should be more about safety instead of how things look. You know, I mentioned at the last meeting, what if we had a meeting about an open door policy to where everyone had to leave their doors open at night just because it's more open and inviting to the neighborhood? Nobody would agree to that. I almost guarantee no one would agree to that. It's kind of the same thing with our fence. Like, our fence is not primarily about privacy. It's about the safety of our dogs, the safety of the community as far as little kids. Like, my dogs play rough. They mean well. They've never attacked anybody, and they don't. They play well with my 1-year-old child and my 3-year-old child. But they're huskies, so they tend to want to get out and run. So not having the ability to have a privacy fence for them, my younger husky sticks his head through the pickets and pops them off. Then he's out. If my other dog gets out, it's almost impossible to catch him. I mean, we had to buy a $250 GPS collar just in case that happens again, so I know where to find him. And where we live, there's a lots of farm fields. There's a state park down the street. So I feel like when the voting comes up to this, you should think more of what's best for that family. And we're using it as a conditional use, so it's not everybody's just allowed to have a 6-foot privacy fence. Where our fence stands, it doesn't impede anything. The only part where you're currently, the code states that we can't have the 6-foot privacy is the street side, but on the other side of my yard, I can have it. So the only part that's open is my backyard. You know, like I said at the last meeting, what is about it that my backyard that makes it more appealing to everybody, that makes the neighborhood seem open? Because if I have a privacy fence on the other side of my yard, you're not going to see any other yard in that neighborhood on that side of the street. So kind of seems redundant to only allow it on basically 3/4 of my yard, but not the street side. If it were impeding traffic or anything like that, I completely understand. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be making any comments about it, because obviously that's a hazard. That's not safe for the neighborhood itself. But yeah, I would just basically to tell everyone to think about what is safe, not just the appeal of it. We can have a 6-foot privacy fence and still everything, make it look nice. We'll have we follow every other part of the code, but just think about safety over the appeal of how it looks. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whipperforth. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comment tonight?
Hi, I'm Susan Keys Johnson at 126 Fargo Street. I'm opposed to the vinyl fences in the city of Lake Mills for a number of different reasons. But one thing that I was curious about was, how does Lake Mills want to represent itself as an eco-friendly community that's concerned about sustainability? Here we have these wonderful platinum LEED schools with this the first national certification in the nation. Are we trying to draw people in with that type of thing? It just seems to me, vinyl fences are not sustainable by any means. As a healthcare provider, I see this all the time. Vinyl is a carcinogen. It leaches into the soil. It affects our plants. It's microplastics that cause toxins that can affect our plants and our animals. It also affects hormones in the body. So I'm just opposed to plastic in general, but also bringing that back into the city of Lake Mills. We have so many beautiful homes, if they're on the historic registry or not, that I think adding a plastic fence is not the way to go. And yes, this hits personally to me, because just in the last week, I had a 6-foot white plastic wall put up in my backyard. That decision was made prior to these new laws being passed. I don't feel that should have been done. But I think there are a number of different reasons to revisit. Specifically, I'm concerned about the vinyl. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I guess I do have one other thing. When it comes to the maintenance of the fence, when it is on the property line, whose responsibility is it on my side to maintain that?
And maybe we can have our zoning administrator address that when we get to that agenda item. Thank you for asking that.
Sure. I have issues with it, how it is currently. It's a white vinyl fence. There is dirt that is smeared on the fence. It's not clean. There are mounds of dirt at the bottom, and there is dead grass, and this is all on my property. So now it's up to me to take care of that, but I'm not supposed to touch the fence.
Susan, what was your last name again? I'm sorry.
Keys Johnson.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other public comment this evening?
Hi, I'm Carol Lee Butzine. I live at 519 Mulberry. We just installed our beautiful $17,000 vinyl fence that's maintenance-free, will never rot, will never rust, does not need painting, no treatment whatsoever. It's beautiful, even though it's on Mulberry Street. There are so many options out there with vinyl now. We have the decorative craftsman style facing the street. You see vinyl fences going up in Sun Prairie, DeForest, Marshall, all over. You want to bring young people to this town. They don't have time to maintain a fence. You've got to think of that too. People don't want wood. When we moved in, there was a fence panel in my neighbor's yard that was installed the wrong way, and it's all rotted. They didn't upkeep it. I didn't complain about that. It's just you got to think of the younger people coming to Lake Mills. With their kids, they don't run into games. They don't have time. And for the environment, you got to think of the wood. Wood needs to be treated every so many years with stain or whatever you put on it. That's harmful too. So I am all for fences. If you want younger people coming to town, you have to pass vinyl. I mean, vinyl, I believe, outperforms in selling than the wood. And it's not just a wall of plastic. They are durable. They withstand wind, the rain, the hail. So I just came to voice my opinion. 519 Mulberry, if you'd like to drive by my house and look at our beautiful fence. We love it. And thank you for allowing it.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak in public comment tonight? Anyone online? Okay, I don't see anyone here, so we will close the public comment period for tonight. Thank you, everyone. And we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the city manager's report.
Good evening. The only thing I'll report on today is obviously we are experiencing high lake levels at this time. Grounds and Facilities has been fielding a number of phone calls, both with concerns that we are releasing the water and concerns that we're not releasing the water quick enough. This was an eventuality that we did anticipate when we chose to manage to the maximum of the water level order. We are releasing water. The dam is in orifice mode. It's, as of this morning, it was releasing at over 50 cubic feet per second. So we are discharging water at a reasonable rate to try and regain compliance. You can see it in the creek behind City Hall. If you go check, you'll see the flow of water going on. So we anticipate this is going to continue for the foreseeable future. We think there's some additional precipitation on the forecast, and with the amount of rainfall we had specifically yesterday, that drainage will continue for 24 to 48 hours alone. So it's not just the rainfall, but it's the days following that result in rising lake levels. So we are discharging water through the dam, where we are doing it at a reasonable rate, and we will continue to do so until we regain a level of 828.33, which is consistent with the DNR water level order. We are also bringing in some resources to explore a discrepancy between the physical reader and the transducer. So we are exploring that. And so we should learn more there, but we'll also, during the survey of the area, be also able to find out if the physical reader is incorrect, or if there's a slight discrepancy with the mechanical reader. So We are looking into it, so we will keep you updated.
Thank you. Any questions for the city manager? Okay, if not, we will move on to council business. And our first agenda item is a consent agenda. We have a memo from Misty, our city clerk, and a number of license renewals. Drake or Misty, do you want to just give an overview of that?
This is just the annual, the time that the consent agenda comes before you for the annual renewals for liquor licensing, tobacco, sidewalk cafe, mobile home park, private well operators. Everything gets put into it unless there's something that catches my eye that needs to be separated out. Everything seemed in order. Everything's included in the consent agenda. If there's any questions of me.
Are there any questions for the clerk?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 9.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Waters, a second by Ms. Quidnow to approve the consent agenda. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Furler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next agenda item is Resolution 24-37, which is acceptance of the 2023 audited financial statement. Misty, would you just read the title of that resolution, please?
Resolution 24-37, resolution of the City Council of the City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin, accepting the 2023 audited financial statement as presented by the external audit firm.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve Resolution 24-37, audit of 2023.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Waters and a second by Ms. Schmager. So who's on staff is going to be giving us an overview tonight?
Chuck, would you like to take us away?
Okay, I'm going to try sharing my screen here.
Thank you. Welcome, Chuck. This is Chuck sorry, I'm missing your last name. From
Chuck Krieger from Hawkins CPAs.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is I know Sam had sent out the full audit report along with the governance letter. We did get we didn't have the summary financial data ready for her in time. It went out late on Thursday, but I typically go and present the summary financial statement. So I will do that, but if you've got questions on any of the details in the full version, just let me know.
Chuck, I did get it into the packet.
Oh, you did? Wonderful.
Yes, council does have it.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's just get started on this one. Okay. Okay, so the first part there, the independent auditor's report. Now this is on the summary financial statements, but basically it hits the highlights. Your financial statements are in our opinion, the accompanying summary financials are consistent in all material respects with the audited financials that we did. And your audited financials typically say there's it's materially correct in all manner for to present fairly in all material respects. Now, I usually mention we don't look at every transaction. We look at enough to make ourselves comfortable with the numbers. And and the result is we give a what's called an unmodified opinion. It is the best opinion you can get. And it's the same opinion that the city's had for some time. Okay. So then we have the summary financial statements. We talked briefly about responsibilities of management. Management is responsible for the financials, and we're responsible for doing an audit of the financials. Okay. So sometimes that that's not exactly clear. You know, people think that we're responsible for the financial statement. We are really responsible for the audit of the numbers. You guys are responsible for the actual statement, even though we prepare it, okay? It's from numbers that you've provided to us. So this is the combined numbers for all the funds of the city, including the utility. Okay, so just a couple of things to mention. Let me just, it's pretty small. I'm not sure how big it's looking at. On my end, it looks pretty tiny, but cash and investments up some from year to year. That varies typically with what you might have for collection on your tax roll, and when you paid your last batch of bills. Okay, it's just kind of ebbs and flows. Some years it's up, some years it's down. Really tough to make a call and say, okay, it's going to be this at the end of the year. Taxes receivable up some from last year, which means you probably the overall tax roll was probably up going into 24, and the collections might have been a little less on a portion of that. Looking at the receivables, the bulk of the accounts receivable, this 1.3 million, is really for the utilities. You know, between electric, water, and sewer, it's probably $1 million of that or more. Special assessments. Last year at this time, I'd mentioned you had a bunch of assessments that went out near the end of 22, and obviously you collected on some of those in 23. So the amount that you are owed on those assessments has gone down. Again, if you have no big projects, you will see a decrease in that as things go on, you know, as time goes on. I will just mention one thing about this lease receivable. That was something new last year. A new standard required us to recognize the value of your agreement that leases that back little parcel of land that the communication tower is on. I think it's Verizon leases it from you. And you've got a lease that lasts for in excess of 50 years with all the renewals, okay? So this value here is really the present value of what those lease payments are gonna be for over the next 50 plus years. Due from other funds, again, pretty similar from last year to this year. Inventory is kind of, the inventory here is all utility inventory. Restricted cash and investments. This typically is, some of this is related to the utilities. They're required to put money aside for depreciation reserves and bond coverage and bond covenants. Some of this also is unspent bond funds for the city. You know, the city might borrow, let's say, a couple $1 million, but they don't spend it all in 1 year. Okay, so what happens is some of that money is restricted because you are required to spend it on whatever you borrowed it for. Typically, your borrowing has been for road improvements and that type of thing, sometimes machinery. Advances to other funds really don't change there. Wisconsin retirement system, I'll just touch on this briefly. Last year, I'm sure I mentioned that the Wisconsin retirement system, you had an asset up here of $575,000. This year, there's no asset, okay? That's strictly due to the market fluctuation on the investments that the Wisconsin retirement system carries. Last year, I would have probably said something like, okay, you got $575,000. It's not something you can go out and spend. And this is why, because when the markets go down, it disappears, okay? It's all related to actuarial reports and to market fluctuation in the investments, okay? Capital assets, pretty stable. That's just your infrastructure, roads, buildings, equipment, water, sewer, and electric utility. and it's after any depreciation on those. These deferred outflows, nothing there, nothing to mention really there. This is amounts that in the future will be an expense. And if you go down here, there's also deferred inflows, which in the future will be revenue, okay? Looking at the liability side of the equation, nothing too out of the ordinary here. I guess I'll mention your long-term obligations up a little bit, mostly because you're borrowing more than what you're repaying, but your repayment schedules are usually fairly aggressive, 20 years or less. But you've been doing a lot of improvements. You have, 6 or so TIF districts. I understand there's another one potentially on the horizon. And some of the borrowing is related to those because you have a development where you have to put in infrastructure, let's say roads, curb and gutter, that type of thing. And you end up putting that in and then getting paid back with that as development occurs. So the deferred inflows, kind of the offset to what I saw up above for deferred outflows, with the exception of these taxes levied for next year. This is strictly money that is not all your money. This is the entire tax roll that the city is responsible for. Includes the school district, the city, the county, and any and vocational school. The city collects a portion of that in December, and then turns the balance over to the county at a later date. So the snapshot of this of these numbers is at December 31st. So that's why the large number shows up here. That's not all your funds, but it's part of it is related to the other taxing jurisdictions that you are collecting funds for at the end of the year. And then the equity section, the net position. This is typically, most of this is due to the utility portion of it. You have your general fund went up about $1 million. A chunk of that was due to unspent bond proceeds. But even overall, your general fund underspent their budget. You had, for lack of a better phrase, net income for the year. So you were under budget. You did well in keeping stuff in line with budget, and with your expectations, you added a little bit to fund balance. Moving on to the next page, this is all the revenue sources that you have in the city and in the utility. I'm just looking at stuff. You had some other grants. You have state transportation. Some of the grant revenue here is ARPA money. It varies from year to year. Depends on what kind of programs you might be pursuing from a grant perspective. You have some lead service line replacement money in there. Looking down at the sewer, water, and electric, consistent from year to year. The electric varies a little bit obviously with usage and and what you pay for electricity that you purchase from Whippy Energy Consortium. Other items to note here: miscellaneous revenue, interest income. Okay. This is, in the last year, I'm sure this was a difficult number to budget for, just because you're not sure what the rates are going to do. But obviously, you did well. You had money invested, and it was invested in the state pool. You got a nice return on your investment. The rates have been up for a year or so, and that's reflected in the interest income number that you see here last year compared to this year. Contribution from developers. This is typically when a developer might put in some water, sewer, electric, and then they in essence donate it to the city. So we recognize that the value of that from the developer. And the reason that it's, I call it donated, but it's deeded over to the city. The city has to accept it because they're really the ones responsible for the upkeep on that. So that's why it becomes part of the activities of the city. And then here's your proceeds from long-term debt. The last thing to note here, the premium on the long-term debt, you still get a premium when you go out to to get your bonds. So it means you're in pretty good shape because the bonds are bid out, and somebody wants to buy your bonds. If they think it's a good deal, they're going to pay a little more for it. So that's where that premium comes in. If you were selling them at a discount, that would be a negative. But in this case, you're getting some premium on the bond sale through your. I'm guessing Ellers does the promotion for that. So. All in all, you can see that the revenue is within about $900,000 of last year. And I said, if you really look at the chunk of it is interest income and proceeds from long-term debt. The rest of it kind of varies from year to year. It's a little pie chart that shows, 50% comes from public charges for services. This is really just the utility revenue, water, sewer, and electric. Now, if we go down to the expense side, looking at this, if you kind of just do the flyby column by column there, nothing really jumps out too much that, hey, that one's kind of out of line compared to prior years. But I talked about the unspent bond proceeds. Typically this goes in the capital outlay area because you borrow long term and you have capital outlay, which means it's going to last long term typically. So you can see here the public works went down some, even though your bond proceeds went up. And that's why your cash went up for the year in some of those other areas because you have unspent bond monies. And that's typical for any municipality that's got a lot of projects going on. You just can't get them all done in 1 year, even though the intent is there. Weather plays a big factor. Sometimes contractors are busy getting help. I mean, there's all kinds of potential reasons for that. And then here's the debt service. Now, I had alluded to earlier that, your total debt went up some. You paid more principal off than last year, but the reason the debt went up was, I mentioned that Wisconsin retirement system, you had a asset last year of $575,000. This year you had a liability. And that shows up in the number on that balance sheet on the first sheet that I showed you. So you paid more principal off on your bonds and notes, but that was more than offset by the Wisconsin retirement system liability increase. And just as you would have expected with the revenue here for public charges for services, kind of your utility being 50% of your revenues, when you look at your expenses, 55% is public works, which again, this is where the utility activity comes into play. And then this shows you, beginning equity accounts, fund balance, revenues in each area, and then what your ending fund balance is. And you'll notice that the TID districts, a lot of them have negative balances. And again, that's typical because you invest money up front and then it increases the tax increment, and that will go to pay off the loans and advances that you might have in those TIF districts. And eventually the hope is that you pay it off and you end up with a positive increment, and it more than pays for your upfront cost. Okay. And typically you've had successful TIF districts. So, some of these are early in their life. So, it's kind of hard. You're not going to go and make I'm not going to even venture to say, okay, yeah, this one's going to make money, because it's too early in the process. Utility stuff here, and then you have some permanent funds. You have library and cemetery perpetual care. So just some chart there that shows how the retained earnings is going up, the equity. And just some general comments here. We talked about it being a clean opinion and unmodified opinion. Again, it's the best one that you can get. Long-term debt is 39 million roughly, and it's about 20 million below your state statute. Or the geo debt is 20 million, which is below the 45 million limit. The 39 is the city and the utility together. And then we issue some reports along with your full financial statements, internal control of financial reporting, those charged with governance. It might be labeled PCWG. Accountants are famous for acronyms, and we love our acronyms. So, and then management advisory comments. Now, I'd be open to any questions you might have, or if there's something else you want me to discuss, feel free to ask.
Does anyone have any questions for Chuck? Steve, any questions?
No, I just say everything looks good. Is there any recommendations that you could give us up front? I know I read through some of your recommendations that they were all minor things, it looked like.
Yeah, generally, yes. I would say, from a recommendation standpoint, one of the things that was on Steve Wilkie's list of wishes, I guess, at one point, and, part of it was our wish too, was that you guys would get on, redo your account numbering to more closely match up with with how the state wants you to number your chart of accounts. So the state has a standard chart of accounts that they hope that the municipalities will use, because it makes it easier from their standpoint for data extraction and comparing stuff. And so with your change in software to Civic Systems, you basically redid the entire chart of accounts. It's more consistent, it's more uniform. And yes, it took some time both on our part and on your part to get our systems back to way, to function the way we want them to. But I think that's a step in the right direction from a efficiency standpoint. And it wasn't delineated in our report, but in the past I've had conversations with, whether it be Jim, who was the predecessor to Betsy Milbrath, or Steve Wilkie, or whoever. The feel was we wanted to get that on a consistent basis between the utilities and the city accounts, and you're there now. So it's a step in the right direction, and I think it's a positive for the city.
Thank you, Chuck. I did have one question about a comment that you made partway through your overview, and you talked about debt proceeds. I think it shows on the screen here, unspent debt proceeds. And did I hear you say that those borrowed funds need to be spent for the purpose that they were borrowed for? And so if they're unspent, what does that mean with what we can do with them?
It typically, it will say we're going to borrow for, infrastructure improvements. And a lot of time it might be more of a generic description, what generally it is, okay, if you're gonna borrow for road work, okay, and you put that in your resolution, the idea is you probably aren't going to, you're not supposed to be spending it on operational stuff. Okay? So if you're borrowing it for a specific purpose, that's what it should be spent on. You never want to borrow money and have it used for operational purposes. You've never had that issue. It's just one of the things with the state revenue limits and all that kind of stuff, they really encourage borrowing to make improvements versus saving to make improvements. Unfortunately, it's, that's the way it is, because they allow you to levy additional taxes to cover debt service, but they don't, and if you don't do that, you're stuck with maybe a lower levy. You might have to go to a referendum, something like that, but you're stuck with a lower amount that you can levy, and that may not give you enough leeway to save money for future improvements. So really, they indirectly, I would say, encourage you to borrow money for projects. Okay. That brings up one other point that I think I need to mention. In the past, we had a comment that said, hey, you don't have a debt service fund, that's required by state statute. That typically was not a big deal, because you still, you made your payments out of the general fund, and you made, and you've never missed a bond payment or a note payment, so that wasn't a big deal. But to comply with the state statute, we always recommended you do that. Well, in the last year, you've taken steps and you've implemented and started a debt service fund. There was no real activity in that in last year, but this year's, tax levy had an amount for debt service fund. So you will see that if you look at last year compared to this year, that comment is gone.
And thanks for pointing that out, Chuck. And we did talk about that during budget season, and our budget, papers and line items looked a little bit different because that fund had been set up. So I appreciate you highlighting that. Greg.
Mr. Krieger, this is Greg Waters, just a quick comment. Thanks for including the depreciation schedules. I think that's one of my favorite questions, and you just took that question away from me. So I do appreciate that's out there now. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Krieger? I don't have any further questions. I would just like to make a couple comments in addition to the addressing the debt service fund. I think this is a good time to highlight all the behind the scenes work that our financial staff did last year with changing the software and all the coding and updates, and particularly our utility bookkeeper, who had probably the most changes to get used to with being so familiar with the prior system. So I really want to compliment Sam and her staff for
6,000 people or so. You've got a lot going on. Okay, there's no grass that grows under your feet there, and we ask a lot of your staff to provide us information, and they do a great job getting it for us. So again, kudos to Sam and her staff. They all do a great job getting stuff ready for us, and we really appreciate that help.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you for all you do also.
Thank you. I think Chuck's been, what did you tell me the other day, close to 20 years doing CPA work for the city, so we appreciate that long relationship and your expertise. If there are no further questions, then let's please have a roll call vote on Resolution 24-37, which is acceptance of the 2023 audited financial statement.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to our next agenda item, letter C is Resolution 24-38, which is a conditional use permit for Rock Lake storage. Misty, would you read that title for us, please?
City Council Resolution 24-38, Conditional Use Permit Declarations and Findings. Petitioner owner Phil Daschel, Rock Lake Storage, Conditional Use Permit for Outdoor Storage, 650 Owen Street, Lake Mills, Wisconsin. Parcel numbers 246-0713, 1243105, and 246-0713, 1243081.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion, please?
I will move approval for Resolution 24-38, the conditional use permit of Rock Lake storage as noted per Misty's reading.
Second.
Second.
Oh, I think Mr. Waters beat you. So we have a motion by Ms. Schmagers, a second by Mr. Waters. Can we have a staff overview of this one?
Sure. Good evening, Council. This conditional use was triggered by a complaint to the city that there was some storage being done on this property. It's zoned and currently used as mini storage, but for outside storage in this industrial district, it does require conditional use. I approached the owner and discussed, the options were to either get rid of the outside storage or apply for a conditional use. And there was a little bit of him and hawing with him. He knew he didn't want to spend the money for one because there's not a lot of space there for him to recoup his money with it, paying for a conditional use. But ultimately, he decided to apply for the conditional use, and staff has reviewed it. The concerns for Plan Commission were, where are they going to go, and can we still circulate safely with fire and EMS rescue? And ultimately, I think there's enough spots there that we can make this work, and our ordinance talks about outside storage and how we can safely and cleanly keep this area looking good and still accommodate this conditional use.
Thank you. And I would note that Phil Dolshall is here in the audience. If anyone has any questions for him as the owner, are there any questions on this proposed conditional use permit?
Do you have a statement? Should we suspend the rules? You're good?
No, I can recognize him, but if you would like to say something, you're welcome to, Phil, but, okay. So I'll just note that the Plan Commission did recommend approval of this and that held the public hearing. And as our zoning administrator, Troy, mentioned, there was some neighbor question about, what extent of outdoor storage would occur, but because of the different setbacks and other things that apply, it's really would not be a significant amount, I think is what you had told us, Troy. So the Plan Commission has recommended approval. Mary.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yes, I have a question regarding the visibility requirement. And specifically, the storage shall not be visible from any public street. And then the second bullet is existing or planned residential area. And I know this particular facility is across from a residential area, and it has some sight lines from the street depending on where the outdoor storage is located. So I'm just curious on how or what is going to be required to address those items.
Do you want me to take this one? So realistically, there's a 50-foot setback from where storage can be. So that front fence facing Owen Street isn't going to be an option for him to store trailers, or any outside storage. It's going to end up being in the sides or in the rear of the property, most likely. There is, we could require some screening requirements if there's a spot that he ends up choosing where, you can see it. We would, require some screening, whether it's going to be additional fencing, slatting, or something along those lines to help protect the visibility from the residential area. But it's really just Owen Street that would be the concern. And I think where currently has some storage and where he proposes to put some, I don't think seeing them from Owen Street is going to be an issue at all.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
On the recommendations, it says outside storage allowed on hard surfaces, asphalt or concrete. I drove by the facility yesterday, and he's currently, I guess, has some things on grass. What's your thoughts there?
Yep, and him and I have had this discussion that, ultimately if this conditional use goes through, they'll be either relocating them onto a hard surface or adding some hard surface back there for the outside storage.
And the reason for the asphalt recommendation?
I think mostly in the past is you don't want those parked on grass. They tend to get rutted up, get stuck, starts to be a blight. The reason I'm assuming for hard surface is just for cosmetic reason. There's nothing really safety wise or anything that I can think of. It was more just so that it maintains the property appearance.
And just to follow up, that's an ordinance requirement,
Yep,
right, for
that's in our
outdoor
ordinance,
storage? Okay,
yes.
not just for this conditional use permit, but.
Right.
Any other questions or comments on this proposed conditional use permit? Okay, seeing none, let's please have a roll call vote on Resolution 24-38, which is a conditional use permit for Rock Lake Storage for outdoor storage.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Our next agenda item, letter D, is Resolution 24-39, which is a conditional use permit for St. Paul Evangelical Lutheran Church for an addition. Misty, please read that title for us.
City Council Resolution 24-39, Conditional Use Permit Declarations and Findings, St. Paul Lutheran Church and School, Conditional Use Permit for Addition, 1530 South Main Street, Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel number 246071324240000.
I move to approve City Council Resolution 24-39 regarding the conditional use permit declarations and findings for St. Paul Evangelical Lutheran Church and School.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Quidnow, seconded by Ms. Schmager. Mr. Evenson, you want to give us an overview of this one, please?
Sure. A little bit more straightforward one here. This is already there's a conditional use for this school. This is an R14. The reason the staff decided to bring this to for a conditional use is just the extent. It's a large enough addition to the school that we thought it was proper to update the conditional use or issue a new conditional use. It's been really well laid out. Staff has reviewed it. Our outside consultants have reviewed it. The only real issue that was brought up at the Plan Commission meeting was the neighbor had said that there were some concerns about the stormwater pond, that it wasn't installed properly. And we've been frantically trying to get you some answers by today. I actually took a ride with Charlie out in his four-wheeler out to the pond, and he walked me around what he had. And I think Brandon, Dwayne, multiple people have been out there looking at it. And I guess what I can tell you today is it's going to get resolved. There's not an issue that has been brought up that we can't address. We're just going to kind of figure out the path of least resistance to take care of it, but nothing's too severe that we can't take care of here in the next couple of weeks once we start getting to the permitting process.
Thank you, and I would add then at the Plan Commission, made an amendment to the Plan Commission motion to specifically highlight that the stormwater management plan needed to meet the city ordinance requirements, so
and that'll be part
that
of
would
our
be a condition.
Correct, and that the rest of the stormwater management is really part of our BSO process and the permitting process. But yeah, we definitely reached out to him and are trying to wrap our arms around this quicker than normal.
So you anticipate being able to address that issue with the neighbor then?
Absolutely.
Are there any questions or comments regarding this proposed conditional use permit?
Can I have a quick moment to read that?
Sure. So again, the Plan Commission had recommended approval of this.
Okay, I'm good.
Any further questions or discussion? Okay, if not, can we please have a roll call vote on Resolution 24-39, which is a conditional use permit for St. Paul Evangelical Lutheran Church?
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is letter E, Resolution 24-40, which is an award of contracted services for engineering. And I think what I'd like to do is have staff go over your recommendation, and then we can get a motion after that.
Sure. There's a memo attached to your packet. It kind of details the process that was gone through for solicitation of proposals as well as evaluation of those proposals. We ultimately received 7 proposals from engineering firms. We conducted interviews with each one of them over the course of a couple of weeks. Following the interview, we convened as an evaluation team and discussed the proposals and the quality of them and who was best situated to provide engineering consulting services to the city. And the evaluation team's recommendation is to retain Strand as our consultant engineer. As the memo notes, I would just note that these aren't exclusive contracts. We still retain the right to seek out other services if there's a project that we need help with for something else, or if Strand is busy working on other things for us. So they will be our city engineer. They will be our main consultant on these things, but we can, of course, always seek out other services if we needed to, but we believe Strand is best qualified to provide these services to the city.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Daly? Great.
I was just going to make a motion to approve Resolution 24-40, authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for general engineering services with Strand Associates.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Waters and a second by Mr. Fields. Misty, I don't know if I need to officially have you read that resolution title. Okay, Drake says no. Okay, so any discussion or questions?
No, I would like to,
Mary.
I would just like to say thank you for noting the process that was utilized. I appreciated the utilization of criteria and scoring, and I think that is just a great way of coming to a great, solid conclusion. So thanks for sharing the process.
Absolutely.
And I'll just note on this resolution and the next one, this is something that the council asked our city manager to do, to put out RFPs for, fresh look at our engineering and planning. And so I appreciate, again, the effort that you did. It's within the city manager's discretion to hire contractors to help our staff with the work of the city. And I appreciate you following the council's direction and going through this process. Any other questions or comments on the engineering award of contracted services? Okay, if not, can we please have a roll call vote on Resolution 24-40, General Engineering Services and Award of Contracted Services?
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Brandon, Herbert. We appreciate working with you and your team and look forward to more great work together. Okay, our next item, Resolution 24-41. I will ask Misty to read that title. That's also Award of Contract Services.
City Council Resolution 24-41, resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for general planning services with Mead and Hunt.
And again, Drake, I'll let you just go give an overview first before we do a motion.
So very similar, the exact same process that we used for evaluating the engineering consultants was used for Mead and Hunt. We received, for planning services. We received 4 proposals for municipal planning services. Also conducted interviews with all four of those firms. Following those interviews, we convened and discussed as a team, and the evaluation committee is recommending that we retain Mead and Hunt Services as our city's planner. Just as the memo noted, I would note that Mead and Hunt, they have in-house historians, which we often hear about the historic nature of the city of Lake Mills, and so that was an important aspect of their proposal. And they also are a full-service engineering firm as well, and have provided engineering services for us, particularly related to the dam. And they have performed our annual dam evaluation in years past. And then they are also able to, if we needed to, along with Strand, assist with GIS. And then Mead and Hunt also has architects on staff as well, if we needed to consult with them on park structures, public facilities, things of that nature. So we are, for planning services, that is what the main purpose of this is, but there is a whole host of other services provided by Mead and Hunt as a company that we have access to through our relationship with them.
Great, thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to approve City Council Resolution 24-41, authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for general planning services with Mead and Hunt.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, seconded by Ms. Schmaker. Is there any discussion or comments or questions? Again, I'll echo Mary's comments from previously. I really appreciate the process that you followed and sharing all of that with us. We've done some transitions under your leadership, Drake, in this last year or so to bring on a full-time zoning administrator in-house. So some of the things that we used to need our planning consultant for, we don't need anymore, but there are a number of things like TID number 9 that they worked on with us recently, and supporting our plan commission through the last update of the comprehensive plan that I think we're appreciate continuing to work with Mead and Hunt, who has that background and experience with our community. Any other comments or discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, on Resolution 24-41?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you, Dustin Wolf and your team. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Okay, let's see. Our next agenda item, letter G, is Ordinance 1265. This is a petition for annexation, and this is the second reading. So Misty, would you please do that reading for us?
City of Lake Mills Ordinance 1265, an ordinance annexing territory of the City of Lake Mills, Jefferson County, Wisconsin.
Thank you. So this is the second reading tonight, so we would typically would carry that forward to our next meeting agenda for a third reading and a vote. Are there any questions or anything that people want to raise before our next meeting? Okay, thank you. Next item is letter H, is Ordinance 1266. This is amending Chapter 660 zoning regulations regarding fences, and this is the first reading. So Misty, would you do the first reading for us?
City of Lake Mills Ordinance 1266, amending Chapter 660 zoning regulations, Article 2 general regulations, 660-14 fences.
Thank you. So this is a new ordinance amendment that's recommended by the Plan Commission. So Troy, could I have you just give an overview of what's in here and what the Plan Commission is recommending?
Sure. I'll kind of give you a quick little back history, I guess, of how we got to this point. Back in late October, early November last year, Mr. Whipperforth, who was commented earlier, their family put up a fence, a 6-foot privacy fence in the street yard, not knowing it wasn't allowed. When I approached them, said you need a permit, and it doesn't meet our ordinance. They took the option to go for a conditional use, which you guys saw, which allows you to modify the height in the street yard, but not the opacity. And this kind of sparked the Plan Commission to say, hey, maybe we should revisit our fencing ordinance. It just seems a little bit clumsy, or maybe just update it if need be. And so with the Plan Commission, we did a work session, and they, staff, or Drake had asked me to research area communities, and the Plan Commission brought some ideas together, and then that's where this ordinance came to Plan Commission last week, and they approved the new fencing ordinance to try to modernize it a little bit and I guess clean it up a little bit. But the only major changes, I guess, that I would say is a few material changes to kind of bring it up to the times. As you guys heard, the vinyl was brought in there, and then there's a comment in there that would allow the zoning administrator to approve similar materials. And then I think probably the other big one is the setback of a 10-foot setback from the property line, if we do allow the opacity to be a little bit, more than 50%, to allow, the staff's review of that was to allow vegetation, or, set it back a little bit to keep it safely away from people in the right of way.
Yeah, all I would add is the Plan Commission focused on the kind of the administrative approval of this. They disliked the time it took to obtain a conditional use for getting exceptions to how the code kind of laid it out before. It was, the work session, it was contemplated whether to include the ability to accept from the 50% maximum opacity requirement. Ultimately, the Plan Commission declined to do so, and so that's what you see reflected there now is if there's a 6-foot tall fence in the street yard, that it has a 10-foot setback. The current ordinance allows for an exception to be granted for a 6-foot tall privacy fence, but all it states is that the setback shall be greater than the typically required setback of 1 foot from the property line. It did not provide any specificity or standard, and so the Plan Commission was seeking to standardize that process as well. So those, as Troy noted, that is one of the main changes to the proposed changes to the ordinance.
I guess I'd like to add a little bit as well. I'm sponsoring this on behalf of the Plan Commission, and there was a public comment tonight about why so many items were struck. And it looks like a lot of things are struck, but then they're added in other places. So much of that is just reorganizing the way the sections are written. So I just wanted to highlight that it's not a lot of things being deleted that it may appear to be. And so, as Troy said, the key changes are to allow vinyl or other similar quality materials that the zoning administrator can approve, and then to allow a fence more than 4 feet high in the front or street yard by a zoning administrator review, rather than having to go through the conditional use permit. So those are kind of the two main changes. Yeah, Mary.
Can I ask a question? I'm curious about the 6-foot fence in the front. Is that a new addition, or has that always been allowed? I'm trying to visualize the aesthetics of a front 6-foot fence, and I'm not sure it's I'm hearing I heard some commentary about concerns about the aesthetics of behind and the neighborhood feel, and I see backyards possibly in a different utilization phase, but a front yard at 6 foot to me is just curious. And so I don't know if that's new, and I would just like to learn more about if that's a new addition and what the thought was, or if that's just being a carryover. I know it has to be approved by the zoning administrator, but the fact that we would be interested in having a 6-foot fence in the front was just of interest for me to learn more about.
So yes, the exception applied to the ability to apply for a conditional use to accept the 4-foot tall limit does exist in the current code. So it's a conditional use process.
For 4, you said, or I'm for 6?
So it's in the front yard and side yard.
Yep.
You're permitted to have a 4-foot tall
right.
fence. If you want to go above 4 feet, you apply for a conditional use. That goes to the plan commission and then ultimately the city council. That applies to the, Troy, correct me if I'm wrong, to the side yard and to the front yard, to the street yard and to the front yard. So yes, it does exist, and they do exist. They are likely, I can't remember the address, but there's some chain link fences that are over 4 feet tall that are in front yards.
Okay.
They maintain that requirement to be a maximum of 50% opaque. So they do exist. I don't know that I would call them common. Certainly backyard fences are certainly
common.
far more common,
Yeah.
but there are front yard fences in the city that exceed the 4 foot height. And then there are some 4 foot kind of picket fences that are only 4 feet, limited to 4 feet, like picket fences and things throughout, more decorative fences.
Yeah. Thank you. I wasn't connecting the opacity and the fence, and I was visualizing something different. And so I see I was missing putting those two together. I was curious about the size, and the opacity I think does make a difference, but okay, thank you. Greg.
In relationship to side yards, I'm trying to understand the 10 feet from the property line. Where does that 10 feet start? Does it start at the street? Does it start at the end of the easement? Where is that 10 feet
It's the
start?
property line. That's what's kind of goofy is everybody thinks that property line is the sidewalk or it's the curb. There's an actual stake, usually 18 inches inside from your sidewalk. If you have a sidewalk in your front yard, that's your property line. So that's what we go off of, and that's what the ordinance is referring to, is the actual property line. Nothing in the right of way really matters. It's the property line.
So 10 feet from the easement then?
The property line.
Typically about,
Go ahead.
10 feet from so typically about 1 foot from back of sidewalk is where the city's right of way ends and private property begins.
So that's where the 10 feet would start from there?
From that imaginary line.
Okay. And then also, I noticed vinyl was added, so vinyl was not part of our ordinance in the past then?
That's correct.
But yet we have a lot of vinyl fences in town.
I think over the last 10 years, a significant number of vinyl fences have been constructed in the city of Lake Mills.
Okay.
Some have been permitted, many likely have not. But yes.
I've got a question for you, Troy, but maybe also a comment with this. I think another one of the reasons why the Plan Commission wanted to look at this part of the ordinance is because we were aware that there's a increased desire from property owners to have fences and so that associated workload. So could you comment on that and also comment on like what's the proportion that you see of different types of materials in the permits that you look at?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to look back and see, but we definitely get more and more fence permits every year. And right now, I would say the last 2 years, it's the request for vinyl is in first place, then chain link, and then wood fences are probably, in third place as far as requests. I did quite a bit of looking around. I haven't found a municipality yet, other than there's a few municipalities that don't allow fences, period. But every municipality that allows fences, vinyl is listed as an accepted use. I've had a couple of contractors from out of the city reach out to me and ask why the city won't allow it. Everybody does them, everybody's using them, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we wanted to get this ordinance in front of you guys for a review to see if that's what you want to do.
Ms. Gayal?
Yeah, Michelle.
Underneath B, and getting back to kind of like the addition of vinyl, I also see alternative fence material of similar quality other than those listed shall require review and approval. And I was doing some research because I don't, unfortunately, I'm not sure, need to put any fencing in my backyard because all 3 of my neighbors have fences. Nothing against me or my family, I promise you. Most of them have dogs. But the point is that if I was to put up a fence, I'm not necessarily saying, one of them is a vinyl fence, one of them is a chain link, and one of them is a wood. So I get all of the options. But if I was going to put something up for the heck of it, one of the things I noted was that there was nothing listed here for like an aluminum fence. Is it possible that we can maybe rephrase that alternative fence material, or is that meant to include like composite or something to that? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what that statement is in there for, is to allow materials that would be of similar quality, similar, design. If somebody approached me with an aluminum, if this ordinance passed, if somebody approached me with an aluminum construction or design showing me the material that we thought would hold up and look nice, absolutely. I think it's really hard. This is going to be a moving target for years to come with materials that are going to come out. And I know Dan doesn't like to pigeonhole ourselves with specific, materials. And it's just probably easier to say, oh, this individual's out in the field all the time, it gets to lay hands and eyes on all this stuff and maybe put it in their hands to say, yes, there'd be a material that the city would condone.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Great.
I guess as I read this, I can think of multiple fences around town that don't comply to this rule here. How does that work with fences that are already in place?
Existing non-conforming, there's a bunch that were done. There's one in Brookstone that always, whenever someone asks about a fence in the front yard and opacity, it was done prior to our ordinance. I think it was 2014, our ordinance came in and I pulled the file on it, and the fence and was put in like 2012, so it's prior to the ordinance. And so once it's there, if it's permitted, it's just existing non-conforming. There wouldn't be any demand to go back and bring every fence that's not compliant into compliance. It's just moving forward from the date you guys, if you approve the ordinance, from that date forward, we'd follow that ordinance.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this evening?
Mr. Curler?
Steve, yes.
One quick question under the maintenance. We'll go back to the question that was offered during the public comment. If you do have the face of the fence right on the property line, how is a person supposed to do maintenance on the front of that fence if they don't have access to their neighbor's lawn? Or what are the parameters under this maintenance section? Because it says they are responsible for it.
Yeah, I mean that's the $1 million question. It's been allowed. We've always allowed it to the property line in the side and rear yard, but yeah, it's one of those deals where some municipalities make you keep it back 2-3 feet for this exact reason. City of Lake Mills has always just gone to the property line, and I guess you hope that your neighbors would allow you to go on that side and paint it or stain it or clean it, whatever it needs to be done, and weed whack whatever needs to be taken care of. But there is a provision in the ordinance that did talk about leaving a 4-inch gap underneath there that would help with maintaining, the weeds and grass along the property line. But yeah, we wouldn't get involved as far as my personally getting involved with the maintenance aspect of it until it became a nuisance, where it was dilapidated or it's falling apart, it's falling into the yard, it's an eyesore. That's really what would trigger my involvement. The rest of it would kind of be hopefully civilly they could take care of the maintenance of a fence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is the first reading tonight of Ordinance 1266, so we will have that carry forward to our next agenda for the second reading. Okay, our next agenda item, letter I, is Ordinance 1267, which is amending Chapter 279 of building constructions related to swimming pools. So, Misty, would you read that, do the first reading for that?
City of Lake Mills Ordinance 1267, amending Chapter 279 Building Construction, Article 1 Uniform Building Code, Section 279 9-17, swimming pool spa requirements, general pool regulations, location and access.
Thank you. Mr. Evenson, you want to give us an overview on this one?
Sure. This one, pretty straightforward, was more just some bookkeeping or tidying up the ordinance. There was multiple spots that it talks about fences in our ordinance, in the pool section, in our fence section, and we wanted to just get them all on the same page that we wanted the fences no closer than 10 feet to a pool, wanted to have a 4-foot minimum around a pool, and that the openings in a fence didn't exceed 4 inches in any one direction. That's a pretty common fence guardrail type system that would go around handrails and pools and balconies.
So this one is really just correcting inconsistencies
100%.
between different
Yep.
parts of the. Does anyone have any questions on this one this evening? Okay, so that's the first reading of Ordinance 1267, so we will carry that one forward to our next agenda. And that is the end of council business for tonight. So agenda item 9 is recommendations for future agendas. So we have those several ordinances that we are going to be moving forward and hearing next time. Drake, is there anything else you would like to mention for our next meeting?
Not off the top of my head right now, no.
There's 2 I think I'm aware of, which are reports from a couple of committees, right?
That's correct. Ad hoc Committee on Urban Forest Management will be here, and there will be a progress report of some kind from the Parks Board on the Mill Pond.
Sounds good. And I think we haven't determined yet whether we'll be meeting on July 2nd or not, but I think we were thinking
Trending towards
probably not.
canceling it.
Okay.
We'll know by the next meeting.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything from council members? Any suggestions for Mary?
Just an update on Sandy Beach progress. I think the timelines were at least noted some activity, quite a bit of activity in May, and so we're into June. So whether it's next or the following, I think that would be helpful.
That's a good reminder. I believe we will have a presentation of progress on design at the next council meeting. The architect will be here.
Great.
Fantastic. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. The next item on our agenda is to convene into closed session to discuss the city manager performance review pursuant to section 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. So can I get a motion to convene into closed session?
Motion to move into closed session?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Waters, seconded by Ms. Quednow. All in favor of convening into closed session signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that's a 5-0. So we will be moving into closed session. When we're completed with that, we'll reconvene, but that will not be televised. So this is the end of the televised portion for this evening. Thank you, everyone.